Welcome friends to today's session of live lectures. Today with us in our studio we have Dr. Namita Rajput. Dr. Rajput is senior faculty or principal in Aurobindo College Evening, University of Delhi. Dr. Rajput has more than 25 years of teaching experience. Today the topic of discussion is relationship of self-efficacy and organizational behavior. Friends, if you have any question regarding to this lecture, you can call us at our toll-free number in the last 10 minutes of the lecture. Our toll-free number is 1800-110-430. Let me repeat it again. The number is 1800-110-430. Let's welcome Dr. Rajput. Welcome, Dr. Rajput.
Good morning, friends. Today we have a very pertinent and important topic which is affecting all of us in every walk of life, be it a corporate life, be it personal life. That is the relationship of self-efficacy and organizational behavior. So today we will be talking on the specific issue of self-efficacy and the organization behavior. Now, taking it forward, the concept of self-efficacy. The concept of self-efficacy was first put forward by Bandura in the way back of 1977. Self-efficacy has been as generalized self-efficacy, perceived self-efficacy. Bandura defines it as an individual's belief that he or she has successfully executed the behavior required by a particular situation. Self-efficacy is a faith in its own abilities to arrange and perform the traditions of the acts requisite to direct forthcoming circumstances. In other words, efficacy of a self is the people's faith in their ability to be successful in certain situations. How people believe, imagine, and act are the faith which have been described as Bandura in 1997. It is an optimistic self-belief in our competencies or chances of successfully accomplishing a task and producing a favorable outcome. So the concept of self-efficacy is a beautiful concept which has been stated by Bandura, and the year is 1977. He has very beautifully conceptualized and coined the word self-efficacy. Now we run through many situations in the different corporate life. Every day is a challenge for us, and of course if you have a kind of a self-belief in you, if you have belief in yourself, your capabilities, your persistence, you're able to manage your personal things and your official things at the best possible way. This is what is called as the self-efficacy. Now basically if a situation comes and you are able to conceptualize that yes, you will be able to manage it, and of course you have some kind of a control over the outcomes of the situation, then of course you are the best example of a self-efficient person. So self-efficacy is a kind of an optimism in yourself, believing in yourself that I can do it, an attitude. Now let me show you this slide. That is the first slide of this presentation. You can see here an ant, taking care of so much of load on her very slim arms. So this is an example of self-efficacy, that is you can do it, a kind of an attitude. Now taking it forward, according to Wood and Bandura, in 1989, the definition which was given by the earlier Bandura, that is way back in 1977, was improved in 1989. Now he said the self-efficacy refers to a belief in one's capability to mobilize the motivation, cognitive resources, and courses of action needed to meet a given demand. Self-efficacy is certainly worth having because, as Henry Ford famously put it, whether you believe you can and you cannot, you are right, and Gandhi perfectly understood the pivotal role that self-belief plays in our lives. So a can attitude can really change your life. A can't attitude can also change your life in a negative way. So, we should try and build up that self-efficacy concept in yourself, a belief that you can do it, having a control over the enduring, the circumstances, which is an outcome of the situations which keep coming and knocking your ways. So, if you have this kind of an attitude that you can do it, and you have only lens of can and you do not have the lens of can't, then you can conquer the world. Now the efficacy concept is basically your beliefs, your faith, your thoughts that you can do it in yourself. Your thoughts become your words, and of course the thoughts are God. The thoughts are a kind of it is not seen in the outside world, but it is the biggest force in yourself and within yourself, which can really push you on the top, which can take you on the top. Your words become your actions become your habit, and your habits becomes your values, and your values become your destiny. So this has been beautifully explained here. So let me give you a recap of what I explained here. Your beliefs are your thoughts. Then of course your thoughts become your words. Your words becomes your action becomes your habit, and your habit becomes your values, and your values becomes your destiny. So that means the self-efficacy plays a major role and a major part in determining our chances for the success. In fact, some psychologists rate self-efficacy above the talent in the recipe of the success. We need to pay a very special attention to the self-efficacy when setting goals to make sure that our efficacy beliefs are in line with our aims and not working against them. So here I have again given the stress on the concept of a self-efficacy, that self-efficacy is a very important ingredient as far as your success journey is concerned, or it is the major ingredient in your recipe of the success. And of course, you have to train yourself, you have to say that I am the best, I can do it. This is a kind of a practice which an individual has to do. And of course, you have to conquer your any kind of apprehensions which are there in your mind, and of course that is the way for the success, and your future success is all yours, and you can attain any kind of heights in the world if you conquer this kind of a concept that you can do it, an attitude, which is of course a very difficult thing to attain in your life, because you have to pay a very special attention onto your own potentialities, onto your own thoughts. You have to train yourself completely, you have to transform yourself completely, and you need to pay attention on the concept of self-efficacy when you have to set your goals to make sure that our efficacy beliefs are in line with our aims and not working against them. Now of course sometimes what you think you can do it and what are your future aims, they are in contrary to each other. So make sure that whatever you think, whatever are your self-efficacy objectives, they are in line with your aims and not against it, because otherwise you will not be able to achieve any kind of success in your life. So where does the self-efficacy come from, and how can you make and you can get more of it? Self-efficacy arises from the gradual acquisition of a complex cognitive, social, linguistic, physical skills through experience. In this regard, Bandura asserted that 4 categories of experience are used in the development of self-efficacy. These are mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, social persuasion, and people's own psychological and emotional states in estimating their capabilities. So here we are giving more of stress on yourself, we are giving more stress on how you can attain a state of self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is all about acquiring a various kind of skills within yourself. The skills will vary from linguistic to social to cognitive, and of course through physical and your experience. Everything which you talk about self-efficacy, the experience plays a pivotal role in attaining a level of self-efficacy that you can. Because when you are budding, when you are growing, your experience is less. So your confidence level will also be less. But if you keep on doing certain things, if you strive yourself that no, there is no force which can stop me, and slowly and steadily you will be on the road of experience, getting rich experience and expertise, and in this line the final destination is your self-efficacy, which is a kind of a key to success of your journey of life. For that example, we are talking about particularly the organizational behavior and the corporate life. So initially when you join an organization, you are very new to the organizations, you need not have any kind of a knowledge as far as your mates are concerned, your the people around you are concerned. So everything is new for you. Even the environment is very new for you. The people are new for you, and for that matter, the organizational policies and your experience is not in congruence with each other. But yes, as and when you stay, you try to stabilize, you try to catch up with the things, and slowly and steadily you try to achieve a certain kind of a skills. And when your boss tells you that you have to do this, so the level which you were there 6 months before and the level which you are there 6 months now, there will be a lot of difference. Why? Because you have gained the experience. So experience is a kind of acquiring those acquired skills, which comes through the language, which comes through the experience, which comes through the working, which comes through the linguistics. And there are so many other domains and the aspects and the frontiers and paradigms which were not a part of this concept earlier. But yes, when you gain experience, you stabilize in your life, then these things will be very trivial issues for you. So taking it forward, in this regard, the Bandura asserted that there are basically 4 categories of self-efficacy which we have talked about, and of course the first is your mastery experience. And there's a saying, the more you do, the more experience and the more wisdom you gain. So all the things are connected with your practicalities, because there's a lot of difference between the theoretical backdrop and your practical aspects. So you have to really practice, and practice makes a man perfect, and that is the concept, one step of the self-efficacy. Unless and until you do yourself, unless and until there is a practical orientation in you, then of course to attain certain things will be very difficult for you. But yes, if you put your hands, try to burn yourself, try to gain each bit of the step yourself, you will be on the journey of self-efficacy very soon. So the social persuasion, people's own psychological, emotional states in estimating their capabilities. Here I would like to make another note, that it is the you yourself who will undermine yourself, saying this, that I cannot do it. This kind of a negative self-efficacy starts right from your childhood. When you go and sit in your exam, you will always say that maths I cannot do. All the practical subjects is not my cup of tea. So, if you keep building these concepts and, whims and fancies in your mind, then of course you will not be able to do it. Because the kind of thoughts you have in your mind, the same kind of practical, it will be shown in the real life. And that is why we say the thoughts are God. You should try and keep those thoughts that I can do it. And of course, eventually the God and the cosmic energy will come to you in your rescue, and you can do it. So these things matter a lot. So the 4 categories of, the 4 categories which I have explained here, as far as the self-efficacy is concerned, we will be doing one by one. So first is your mastery experiences. The first and the foremost source of efficacy is through mastery experiences. However, nothing is more powerful than having a direct experience of mastery to increase the self-efficacy. Having a success, for example, in mastering a task or controlling an environment will build a self-belief in that area, whereas the future and a failure will undermine the efficacy belief. To have a resilient sense of self-efficacy requires experience in overcoming the obstacles through effort and perseverance. So here the first category which adds to the self-efficacy in the journey of the success, in attaining the topmost positions in your life, to have control and uproot any kind of apprehensions, the first and the foremost category which we are talking about here is a mastery experience. So let me explain you this concept. When you talk about the mastery experience, it's all about that you are practically into it, you are actually doing it. So doing is learning, doing is actually experiencing, and you are going through a particular thing. And of course, if you keep on doing it, and nothing is more powerful than having this kind of a mastery experience yourself, because you are into it, you know the practicalities, you know the difficulties, you know the plus and the minus, you know the whims and fancies, you know the negatives and the positives of a particular situation. So nothing can beat it. No, there is no other substitute to add self-efficacy but to gather and experience a rich mastery experiences. So this is the first and the foremost kind of an experience which adds to the self-efficacy. So to have the resilient sense of self, the efficacy, it requires the experience. And of course, when you gather the self-experience, everything you can conquer, and you can even overcome the obstacles through your efforts and constant working towards it. So this is the best way of adding towards the self-efficacy. The next is your vicarious experiences. The second source of self-efficacy comes from the observation of people around us, especially the people who consider as role models. Seeing people similar to ourselves succeed by their sustained efforts raises our belief that we too possess the capabilities to master the activities needed for success in that area. Now, this is a very important concept in the addition of self-efficacy is concerned. When you talk about the self-efficacy, the concept of vicarious experience is all about when you see a role model in front of yourself. When you see anyone working in front of your own eyes, you can always visualize that I can also do it. So, having a role model in front of you, having the actual experience which your eyes are watching, that if she can do it, why can't we? So it is a kind of similar outcomes which you can perceive about yourself if your role model is doing a same thing. So you can also possess the capabilities, and you start believing that if one person who is your role model can do it, why can't we? So you start imitating in a very hidden way, or could be in a very observant way, or could be actually saying to that person that we are following your footprints. So this can really add to the vicarious experiences, and this will also add to the self-efficacy. So we have, when we started with the concept of how you can gain the self-efficacy, the first thing which we talked about was mastering experience. And as far as the mastering experience is concerned, this is the first and the foremost, and there's no substitute as far as adding to the self-efficacy is concerned. And the second is your vicarious experiences, which comes from the actual depiction of your role models doing a particular thing in front of your own eyes. So you start imitating that person, you start following the footprints of that person, and of course this will add to your capabilities, to your efficacy levels also, to achieve the success in that area. Now coming on to the third category, that is the social persuasion. Now influential people in our lives, such as parents, teachers, managers or coaches, can strengthen our belief that we have what it takes to succeed. Being persuaded that we possess the capabilities to master certain activities means that we are more likely to put in efforts and sustain it when the problem comes. Now, as far as the social persuasion is concerned, here the major party is your influential people who are around you. Now, the people who are around you are your parents, your siblings, your peer group, your friends. So they, or the managers and the coaches, they always try and strengthen your beliefs, your thoughts and your actions, that yes, you can do it. So if you are being persuaded by the people around you, so you start actually putting yourself in that particular direction which your people around you want you to see them, and of course they are transforming you also, and you also want to perceive yourself and you want to see yourself in that particular future situation. So in that case, we are more likely to put in the efforts and sustain it when the problem arises. So this is a kind of a social persuasion, and social persuasion comes from the social and the peer groups. It could be your parents, it could be your coach, it could be your teacher, it could be your own children, it could be your coaches, it could be your anybody who's around you and can affect your life. So the persuasion skills can also add to your self-efficacy skills. So now we have completed the three categories of adding to your self-efficacy levels. The first we talked about was a mastery experiences. The second which we talked about was a vicarious experience which comes from your role model. The third is your social persuasion, which comes from the persuasion of the people who are around you. So they are also acting as a catalyst to change your character, to change and put you on a direction of a success. Now coming on to a fourth and the most important aspect of the self-efficacy levels, that how you can add to your efficacy levels, is your emotional and psychological states. Now, as the name suggests, you're talking about more of emotional and more of, the physiological states. The state you are in will influence how you judge your self-efficacy. Depression, for example, can dampen the confidence in our capabilities. Similarly, the stress reactions or tensions are interpreted as the signs of vulnerability to poor performance, whereas the positive emotions can boost our confidence in our skills. So we are talking here about your emotional states, your physiological states. Now the emotional states come, we are talking about the mental levels, the mental states. So here we are talking if you are happy, if you are sad, if you are depressed, if you are overjoyed. These states of mind, we call it as emotional state of mind. They influence the efficacy levels to the tremendous extent, to a substantial extent. Similarly, your physiological state, they also affect. Sometimes it weakens your the efficacy levels, and sometimes it boosts your efficacy levels. So you have to be very particular about the emotional and the physiological states, because they also play as a catalyst an important role in increasing and, on the other hand, decreasing your efficacy levels to the largest extent possible. Now, fifth category here we are talking about is imaginal experiences. Now, the psychologist James Maddox has suggested a fifth route to self-efficacy through imaginal experiences. The art of visualizing yourself behaving effectively or successfully in a situation, the relationship between knowledge and action. I repeat, this is a kind of, the art of visualizing yourself behaving effectively or successfully in a given situation, the relationship between the knowledge and the action. So here we are giving stress on the knowledge and its immediate relationship with the action. Self-efficiency arises from the gradual acquisition of complex cognitive, social, linguistic, physical skills through experience, and asserted that the four categories of experience are used in development of self-efficacy. These are mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, social persuasions, and people's own physiological and emotional states in estimating their capabilities. So when you talk about the imaginal experience, this is a kind of a very particular relationship which we are talking about here, is about the knowledge and about the action and its relationship between the two. And overall we have now explained various 5 categories. When you talk about the categories of increasing or decreasing the self-efficacy levels. So till now what we have done, let me give you a recap. We started with the concept of self-efficacy. It is a kind of a faith in your own abilities to perform a tradition of acts requisite to direct forthcoming situations. That is, you have a control of your outcomes and you have a kind of an attitude that you can do it with all kind of positive knowledge, positive experience, positive thoughts, and again they are all striving towards this kind of in quotes that you can do it. And of course the self-efficacy can be acquired through experience. The more you gain experience, the better it is for you, and the self-efficacy level goes up. Then we talked about that in the concept of self-efficacy, the beliefs play a very important role, because the beliefs, they are, your beliefs becomes your thoughts becomes your words becomes your actions, the actions becomes your habit, and your habits becomes your values. So your values becomes your destination. The self-efficacy plays a major part in determining our chances for success. In fact, some psychological rate self-efficacy above the talent in the recipe of the success. So we need to pay a very special attention to the self-efficacy when setting the goals, to make sure that the efficacy beliefs are in line with our aims and not working against them. So how do we attain this level? So, the self-efficacy levels comes from cognitive, social, linguistic, physical, and through experience. So in this regard, we have talked about, and we already talked about the 4 categories which we had discussed one by one. First, we discussed on the mastery experience, that is, there is no substitute to gain the self-efficacy rather than just getting the experience yourself. So when you burn your hands yourself, you will be able to gain more of the this efficacy levels. So the second aspect is your vicarious experiences, which comes from the actions of your role models, followed by the social persuasion, which comes from the people around you who can influence you, and they are your parents, your teachers, your managers, your coaches, etc. They have a tremendous role to play as far as affecting their mindsets is concerned, and of course your efforts and sustainability is concerned. So they play a very pivotal and a catalyst role in this regard. Now we are coming to the emotional and the physical states. When you talk about the emotional and the physiological states, they also have a very important role to play as far as the self-efficacy is concerned, because more positive you are, more pepped up you are, will play a very important role. Similarly, the less important you are in terms of your thoughts, you're feeling depressed, so it is going to negatively have a negative spillover onto your self-efficacy levels. So you try and that is why we say that we should be positive always. We should always try to gather the positive energy rather than just absorbing the negative energy and just spilling out everything positive around you, because these positivities have a very important role to play as far as your efficiency or self-efficacy levels is concerned, your achievements are concerned in life. Because if you keep on adding to your negative skills, your negative aspects, then it is going to create a lot of problem in terms of your achievements in life. Then we talk about your imaginational experiences. The imaginational experience is a kind of a visualization, believing yourself effectively or successfully in a given situation. So here we are talking about a very particular relationship between your knowledge and your action. So let us now start about the self-efficacy dimensions. Now the self-efficacy dimensions has 3 dimensions. The first is the magnitude, the second is the strength, and the third is the generality. Now taking it forward, the first dimension of self-efficacy levels, that is the magnitude. It applies to the level of task difficulty that a person believes he or she can attain. Now self-efficacy levels dimensions, the first and the foremost we are talking about here is the magnitude. That is, it talks about the difficulty levels, the type of the kind of difficulties which we see and perceive when you're taking it forward, and the person believes that this kind of a difficult level we can sustain or not. The second is your strength. It refers to whether the conviction regarding the magnitude is strong or weak. The third is the generality. It indicates the degree to which the expectation is generalized across the situation. Now these 3 dimensions again has been coined by Bandura, and he has coined the concept of self-efficacy also. The magnitude, strength and generality will define all the dimensions relating to the self-efficacy. Now there are certain whims and fancies about an individual thoughts that this is the kind of difficulty level is so strong for me that I cannot take it. So you have to see here the kind of dimensions which you can always take up, the difficulty levels you can take up, and as far as the conviction about whether this is strong or weak, the magnitude is strong or weak, and similarly it indicates the degree to which the expectations can be generalized across the situations. Now coming on to a very important concept of relationship of self-efficacy to the motivational concepts. Clearly, the role of self-guiding thought is a key element in self-efficacy theory. According to Brief and Agdag in 1981, he argued that self-management and self-efficacy are related to other concepts in organization behavior, but their treatment of the topics is very, very limited. This section complements the Brief and Agdag's work by suggesting specific theoretical links between the self-efficacy and other concepts pertaining to work, motivation and the performance is concerned. The relevance of self-efficacy is explaining a variability in the task performance is emphasized. So this relationship of self-efficacy and the motivational level is a kind of a self-guiding factor, and the self-guidance play a very important role in this self-theory. Now the first thing which we talk about here is a goal setting. According to Locke and Locke, Sari, Shaw and Latham, way back in 1981, they detailed the important role of goal setting in employee motivation. The number of researchers have verified the positive effects of goal setting on performance in organizational settings. In groups with specific and challenging goals consistently have shown a higher levels of performance than the groups with no goals and easy goals or do the best goals is concerned. The Locke has suggested that self-efficacy provides an integrating mechanism between the social learning theory, the goal setting approaches to performance. Self-efficacy is developed through social learning process. This is in turn leads to more productive goal setting. So goal setting is very, very important mechanism, and of course it talks about the social goal theory and the goal setting theory performance. Self-efficacy is developed through these learning theories, that how an individual is able to pick up the goals and how he is able to take up with the goals and how he turns his goal setting into productive learning experience. So these things are part and parcel of the goal setting. Now in one of the goal setting, one person believes and perceived that task ability had a magnificent effect on performance even though controlling all other variables. In a laboratory experiment designed to assess the links among self-efficacy, goal levels and performance, the Locke in 1984 found that the magnitude of self-efficacy was positively related to the goal level chosen in 2 or more 3 trials, and it positively related to task performance in all the 3 trials. This study also found that the strength of self-efficacy perceptions affected the goal level chosen, the specificity of goals, the goal commitment and the task performance. Further, the research is needed to determine if these results generalize the task performance in the field setting. So it is a kind of a very important subject when you talk about the self-efficacy levels are concerned, because here we are talking about the goal setting, here we are talking about an individual, that how he is able to set the goals, how he is able to perceive the goals, and how he is able to convert the goals into a kind of a learning experience for him, and how he is able to take up with the goals effectively and produce them effectively. So the goal commitment, the goal taking, and the goal taking it forward, so all these things, they play a very important role as far as the self-efficacy levels is concerned, and the teaching learning experience is concerned, and of course the transforming of your goal setting to a real-time experience is concerned. Next is your feedback. It appears that the feedback is important in formulating the efficacy levels, perceptions and that interact with the goal setting to enhance the performance motivation. Self-generated feedback may be especially helpful in building a self-efficacy. In an experiment, a group of engineers generated their own structured, continual feedback, reporting progress to their superiors once per quarter. They performed better than another group of engineers who were given a feedback by their superiors once per quarter. Without self-monitoring in the interims, the self-monitoring process appears to be an equivalent to be a guiding and active mastery, which should lead to a high self-efficacy and hence to high performance. Bandura and Servone found that unfavorable feedback tended to yield a negative self-evaluation. This led to increase in motivation during the performance of the task. Now, coming it to the forward levels and the feedback levels, the feedback is very important for the organizations because the feedback is all about formulating the perceptions about an individual to taking it forward and carry out the further goals are concerned. The self-generated feedback is very important because here we are talking about a constant feedback which is required for an individual to take up with the possibilities is concerned. Now they performed, here we are giving an example of a group of engineers who generated a particular self-efficacy levels. They generated the questionnaire, they generated a self mechanism, they generated again the reporting progress which was assessed from time to time. So that mechanism which they designed themselves was also a kind of increasing the self-efficacy levels because they are monitoring the process themselves, they are leading to the self-efficacy levels, they are leading to a high performance levels. So they found that the unfavorable feedback tended to yield the negative self-evaluation. This led to increase in the motivation level, subsequent performance of the task. Now coming on to a locus of control. The self-efficacy has been compared to the internal locus of control. The Rotter defined the internal locus of control as a perception that rewards are contingent to individual behavior, while external locus of control is a notion that rewards are controlled by the outside factors such as chance. However, two important distinctions can be made between self-efficacy, internal locus of control. First, the internal versus external locus of control, that is IE, is a generalized construct covering a variety of situations, whereas self-efficacy is a task performing, examining the individual's conviction that he or she can perform a specific task at a specific level of expertise. Bandura stated that individuals may show strong internal locus of control in general, but they believe that they have a low levels of skill in the certain areas, which would lead to low efficacy perceptions on certain relevant areas. A second difference is the locus of control as measured by Rotter IE scale includes the outcome expectancies in addition to particular behavior expectancies. So when you talk about the locus of control, it is just finding out that part which is weaker in you. So they try and strengthen that part so that the self-efficacy levels could be moved up or pepped up. So the locus of control plays again a very pivotal role in attaining the higher levels of self-efficacy levels. And of course, we talk about here the self-expectancy theory. The expectancy theory terms that IE items are measuring a E2 rather than E hash. In spite of these differences, there is a evidence of relationship between the two constructs as currently measured. The Chambliss and Murray, way back in 1979, they observed an interaction effect in their research on smoking reduction. Internal locus of control combined with the high efficacy levels led to a greater reduction in smoking. Research exploring this interaction would contribute to a better understanding of theoretical differences between two constructs. Further, since the self-efficacy was found to affect a goal level chosen and the goal commitment, a three-way interaction may exist among the self-efficacy, locus of control and a goal setting. Now basically here we are talking about the expectancy theory, the locus of control and the combination of the various steps which we have talked about. And the issue of the self-efficacy was found to affect the goal level chosen and the goal commitment. Now the level of goal you choose and the level of goal commitment is a kind of a locus of control and the expectancy theory which we are talking about. Now we come on to an important concept called modification, behavior modification. Now behaviorism sometimes acknowledge thoughts including the efficacy judgments, epiphenomenal accomplishments of conditioned automatic responses. In this view, the environment is seen as causing behavioral responses in a unidirectional manner without involving the cognition or violations. The Bowles, way back in 1972, argued that reinforcement leads to change because an underlying reinforcement process suggests the value appraisal and thereby the cognition. Bandura pointed out that if the efficacy judgments were epiphenomenal of automatic responses, arousal would be an equally good predictor of behavior, because this is not so. Efficacy levels is, when you talk about the behavior modifications, they are very, very important and sometimes the underlying force is the change in the behavior, or the underlying phenomena is a kind of a reinforcement process which suggests that the behavior has to be changed or it has to be recognized, or some kind of a cognitive factors are there. So it is basically very, very important aspect of the self-efficacy levels. Bandura suggested that the behavioral changes that are brought about by the reinforcement of a particular object are influenced by many things like self-monitoring, goal setting, goal surveillance and the causal influence of anticipatory thoughts. Now this is very, very important here to understand that the behavioral changes which we are talking can be better reinforced by many of the factors which are again very, very important in nature. Like for example, the things which are under control, you have to constantly monitor them. The monitoring process is a self-adjusting process, and of course you try and have an anticipatory changes which you are looking upon, and there is a closed surveillance system. So all these factors they are a part and parcel of the reinforcement system and can really cause a change in the behavior, and of course can also change the levels of the self-efficacy levels. So these things are very important to be understood as far as the self-efficacy levels increase and reduction is concerned. The social learning theory, when you talk about, does not posit any fixed relationship between the automatic responses and behavior. The role cognition plays is self-regulation and explicitly acknowledged. Accordingly, self-efficacy theory may partly explain when reinforcement will work. A high self-efficacy perception might be needed to facilitate the operant conditioning, that is, a belief that one can take an action that brings a reward. Further, research might explore the cognitive mechanism through which the environment and person interact to influence the behavior. Now coming on to a very important part of my lecture, that is, what is the implication for the organization behavior of self-efficacy and on to a human resource management. We have already talked about the concept of self-efficacy. Now self-efficacy is a kind of a confidence in yourself in relation to control on the outcome and can-do attitude. This can really, with this kind of an attitude, you can conquer the world, you can do any a small thing in a very significant way, and you can achieve the organizational success, and the whole path will be full of success if you are moving towards the perceived goals in relation to and with the self-efficacy. So if you are having this conviction that yes, you can do it, what is the specific implication as far as the organization behavior and the human resource management is concerned? Let us have a look on this. The research on the self-efficacy generally has supported a high level of correlation between the efficacy perception and subjective performance. The following implications for selection, leadership, training and vocational counseling are offered in the light of that research. However, validation of a high correlation between the efficacy perception and performance in work settings would be required before such practices are adopted. The correlation between the two is imperfect. Implications are discussed for interactions for the locus of control, equal employment opportunities, performance appraisals, goals and incentives. Suggestions for extending the efficacy theories to groups and for developing an instrument for broader predictions also are made. The first is your selection. Now, as far as the self-efficacy appears to be relevant for the selection in many ways, because the selection of high-performing individuals is very important for the organization. Self-efficacy as a predictor of performance may be very, very helpful. Research is needed to determine if self-efficacy is generalizable to job situations and to specify the conditions under which it might be used. When selected instruments are used, some assessment of self-efficacy might be useful in conjunction with a battery of other measures. Job interviews are a potential setting of self-efficacy levels, although the response, that is faking, may need to be controlled. Implications of self-efficacy for selection extend to placement and career planning also. Periodic assessment of employee efficacy perceptions on a wide variety of tasks may reflect a clusters of potential abilities and could be relevant to career advancement. As the positions become vacant, individuals with high efficacy levels for relevant skills might be considered. Now we are talking on a particular aspect of the self-efficacy levels and its influence on the kind of an organization behavior and human resource management is concerned. The first, we are talking about the selection. Selection has got a very important, meaningful impact on the self-efficacy levels, because when you are in the process of selection, you always try and find out the best people who are self-motivated, and the self-efficacy levels, individuals with high efficacy levels, they are a kind of an asset for the organization, and this can take the organization to the process. Now, when you're making a kind of a rule that you always need a people with some kind of high efficacy levels, it is going to give the organization a big push. And similarly, as and when the positions of the organizations are vacant, so you can call a list of the people with the high efficacy level, and you can make a kind of a panel out of which that if there is a casual vacancy and you want any person to be filled, so you must have that kind of a person with the high levels of efficacy levels. Then again, second, we have a leadership concept. Again, you have to relate it with the self-efficacy levels. So these are, have a deep impact on the organizational behavior and of course onto the human resource management. So let us now have a look on the leadership as far as the impact on the organization behavior is concerned. So this early leadership research, they focused on the leader traits as a key causal variable in subordinate performance. Other studies examined the impact of leader behavior or style on the subordinate performance. However, some concerns remains that these concepts have not proven very successful in predicting the performance and that new approaches are needed. A competency-based approach to leadership has developed from job analysis concept in personnel management. The Boyce defined the job competency as an underlying characteristic of a person that results in effective or superior performance in a job. It is expressed in specific actions or demonstrated behavior that it is generic to the job. Identifying a critical managerial competencies is of potential importance to the organization behavior. There are significant correlation between the perceived actual competencies because perceived competencies has much in common with self-efficacy. The perceived competencies could be defined as a generalized self-efficacy, the conviction that one can successfully carry out a range of the actions. As far as the leadership qualities are concerned, the individuals who have this kind of a quality to lead the organization to the best possible extent, you should try and find out such kind of a people, because the leadership skills and the efficacy levels are more or less overlapping. Because a leader, if he believes that he's a leader, that means he has a kind of a conviction in his mind that there is no problem in running the organization, and he can take the organization to the heights as far as the abilities is concerned. Similarly, in the training and the vocational counseling can also transform an individual in affecting the organizational performance and the efficacy levels. The efficacy levels could go up if a periodic training and the vocational training is given to them. So this is a kind of pepping up in terms of their efficacy skills, because this will give them a confidence, a kind of a vocational training, and they can have an exam out of that, that yes, he has undergone this kind of extensive training and now he's competent enough to handle these issues. So this is going to again have a positive impact on the self-efficacy level, which is again a very important and a landmark aspect for the organization to carry on. Another implication of the self-efficacy in the training areas, that specific problems sometimes could be stressing of the low efficiency levels. So by incorporating and supplementing with these kind of changes into an individual and arranging the training programs for them, then this issue of a particular gray area can be solved very, very easily. Now you can also have the interactions with the locus of control. The correlations and the interactions of the self-efficacy and the locus of control needs to be specified, because they have a deep implications for the performance improvement of an individual and groups in the organizations. There are several studies which have shown a very positive behavioral, the correlations with the internal locus of control. So it is likely that the persons with the internal locus of control may need fewer inactive mastery experience to improve the efficacy perceptions and performance. They may also respond more readily to the modeling, because they tend to believe that they are the models, generally are in control with the environment, and it has been shown that modeling is most effective when subjects can identify with the model's ability to the personal capabilities of an individual. So as we have seen here that there is an interface and a close interactions between the locus of control and the self-efficacy level. So things have to be managed in this direction, because they have a strong spillover onto increasing or decreasing the self-efficacy levels. Now, in contrast with the people of some external locus of control, it may also be inclined and viewed inactive mastery services as luck. So, coming on to a next aspect, that is the performance appraisal goals and incentives. The organizational objectives of performance appraisal systems include the performance improvement, employee development, and motivation through goal setting. Because the feedback may be pursuant input to efficacy perceptions, and because the negative feedback may reduce the motivation, research is needed to examine the effects of performance appraisal feedback on these objects. Low self-efficacy may be induced by negative performance appraisal. If so, the low efficacy may inhibit the effort when skill is present, and it may lead to easy discouragement. Research is needed to determine if the performance can be improved by enhancing the efficacy perceptions. It also is needed to develop the efficient mechanism for enhancing the efficacy perceptions in conjunction with the performance appraisals. So taking it forward, the Bandura and Servone also maintain that self-regulation is important in the human resource management and motivation, and that the goal setting and self-evaluating reactions are indispensable in the process. Research is needed to determine the extent to which the successful use of goals and specific incentive techniques are concerned, and the manipulation of self-efficacy may change the relative effectiveness of these techniques. Now, we have seen here that there are so many gray areas as far as the increasing or decreasing of the self-efficacy aspects is concerned. So, there is one solution to all these things, that you can always manage any gray area. It could be a locus of control, it could be any kind of a problem in acquiring a particular skill. So, some kind of a mastery experiences can solve all lot of problems, because when you go and experience through these things, the efficacy levels has a strong impact. Either they go up or they go down. Unless and until an individual experiences this aspect, they will not be able to learn to a group performance. So now coming on to group and organizational performance. Bandura suggested that self-efficacy theories can be extended to groups and large as nations. If so, research is needed to develop an assessment instrument for a group efficacy. One approach might be to aggregate the individual efficacy perceptions and compare them with the subsequent group performance measures. Another might be to have the individual rate their own perceptions of the group efficacy and then average their performances. A third possibility could be using a group consensus responses to a single efficacy questionnaire. It would be important to determine the superior method in predicting a subsequent performance. By using a valid instrument, research may show that group perception of efficacy are related to a group performance. So this is another important thing which we can take the self-efficacy levels to, that is to judge the efficacy levels of the particular groups. So here there are so many options in which we can exercise it. One could be that you can ask an individual individually about their efficacy levels, and then if there are 10 people in a group, so individually we can ask this question from 10 different people and then average it. Or you could have an instrument to take the efficacy levels together simultaneously of all the 10 people and then average it. And it could be just talking individually and having a little different modus operandi to collect the information relating to the self-efficacy levels. Anyhow, any of these methods will lead to a very important outcome, that is to judge the efficacy levels of the group at large, and of course that how they are going to change their performance levels. So this is also a very good instrument, because in an organization we work in groups, we have different small groups rather than individuals. So devising a better technique to come on to the efficacy levels of the groups is also very important for the success of the organization. The concept of group efficacy also could be examined in context of the organizational change. So resistance to change is one example. It is a common phenomena where the people are not liking to initiate any kind of a change in the organizations, and sometimes it may be by a low efficacy expectations and the fear of failure. Now see, when you are living in a contemporary world, you are living in a dynamic world, so it is inevitable sometimes to just be the way you are. You have to take a leap step, you have to introduce the radical changes in the organization, and for that matter, the group efficacy levels, to know the group efficacy levels are very pivotal, because you have to introduce a particular strategy, and specifically when the people are resisting the change. So to counter this kind of a resistance of change, and of course to calculate the group efficacy levels, they are very, very pertinent and important to understand. So research is needed to tackle this issue, and an efficacy intervention could aid the organizational change, because organizational change is mandatory these days, it is inevitable these days, and self-efficacy levels, if we know in advance, we can use it as a key to implement the organizational changes. So overall we can say that there are so many tools and instruments which we are having in the self-efficacy levels to pep up, to go down, and the various dimensions is concerned, etc. So let me give you a recap of what we did in the second half. Like we started with the 3 dimensions of the self-efficacy levels, the magnitude, the strength, and the generality. There is a strong conviction amongst the individuals that we cannot do it, it is too difficult to be introduced, and I cannot take this kind of a step, and so on and so forth. So the self-efficacy level have to be pepped up by introducing certain experiments, that is the mastering experiences. They have to go through each and every process to understand that yes, to increase the efficacy levels is very, very important, and it is a very magical instrument which can actually give the organizations a big chance to achieve the success. Then we did the relationship of the self-efficacy levels and the motivational levels. The people who are having a higher degree of self-efficacy levels can be those persons with the high motivational levels. So they are having a very positive and a straight relationship The motivation of those people with the high efficacy levels are very high compared, and on the contrary to those with the low levels of efficacy levels, their motivation levels are high. And the motivation levels, they affect the working of the organization. You can achieve the big success performance if you have the high efficacy levels in the organization. Then we talked about the goal setting, the learning process, that this is the goal setting of, and the selection of the goal is important. Then monitoring of that goal is important. To what extent you are into that process is also very important. To taking care of self-adjusting system, so that if anywhere there is a decay or a failure of any of the concept, it can be picked up anytime. Followed by a feedback system. The feedback system is mandatory to make a system of self-efficacy on an automated process. Why? Because the feedback is very, very important in terms of increasing the efficacy levels. Then we talk about the locus of control. The self-efficacy has been compared to the internal locus of control, the external locus of control. If there is any kind of a gray area, we can always talk about, adding to this aspect and increasing to the levels of the gray area. Now, the expectancy theory is very, very important. The expectancy theory, that to what extent you can do it, the interaction of the self-efficacy levels, locus of control and the goal setting, they are most important in terms of taking that part into it.
Thank you, ma'am, for concluding, and we hope, friends, that this session of live lecture helped you in the concept clarity of self-efficacy and organizational behavior, and this is going to help you in your educational and professional career as well. If you have any questions or suggestion about this session, you can mail us at our email, and our email is info.cec@nic.in. Thank you for joining us and have a good day.